Rob, her son-in-law, slammed his fist on the table. You sold the house behind our backs. Elaine didn't flinch. I owned it. You just lived in it, loudly. She slid the trust across the table. His name had never once been on it. Stephanie, her daughter, read it, lips trembling. You revoked it? Elaine met her eyes. You gave me the garage. I gave you the consequence. And for the first time in years, the last seat at the table belonged to her. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The scent of candied yams and rosemary turkey drifted through the open concept kitchen, mingling with the laughter of guests and the clink of stemware. Elaine stood just to the side of it all, unnoticed but not absent. That's how it had been for months now, present by default, invisible by design. She smoothed the sleeves of her navy cardigan and scanned the room. The couch, her spot since the move, was taken by 3 guests Stephanie had invited from her yoga studio. The armchairs were claimed, dining chairs scattered for overflow. Elaine took a breath, then leaned slightly toward her daughter. Where should I sit? She asked, voice low so as not to interrupt the toast Rob was delivering about gratitude and boundaries. Stephanie turned, already glowing from her second glass of wine, her lips pulled into a too-wide smile. Oh, Mom, the garage has space. We just don't have enough seating for everyone. Then, with a quick glance toward her guests, she added with a laugh, Guests get the couch, you understand. She didn't wait for a reply. The moment was dismissed like an empty plate. Elaine nodded once as if she'd expected it and walked to the kitchen island. She filled her plate carefully, just a little of everything, nothing messy. Turkey, green beans, a spoonful of cranberry sauce. When she turned back around, no one was watching. The sliding door creaked as she pushed it open. The garage greeted her with a chill that smelled faintly of motor oil and cardboard. Her eyes adjusted. The lawn chair sat in the corner, angled toward a mini fridge and a deflated exercise ball. She placed her plate on a folding tray, eased herself down, and pulled her cardigan tighter. Overhead, the fluorescent garage light flickered twice, buzzed, then steadied. From inside, laughter swelled again. A guest exclaimed over the wallpaper. Rob bragged about how long the renovation took. Elaine picked up her fork, her hand steady but her jaw set. She's here rent-free, Rob's voice drifted in from the cracked interior door. Least she could do is stay invisible. Someone chuckled in reply, a woman's unfamiliar voice. You're terrible. I'm honest, Rob said. She just sort of moved in after her place sold. It's not permanent. At least that's what I was told. Elaine placed her fork down gently, not because she was finished, but because if she didn't, it would snap between her fingers. She stared at the far wall where Stephanie's old high school trophies sat in a clear bin labeled Donate Later. A layer of dust dulled their shine. Above her, the light buzzed again. Stay invisible. Her back straightened in the chair. She'd taught American history for 40 years, raised Stephanie on a single salary, skipped dates, vacations, even elective surgery when tuition bills hit. Bought the house they all now lived in, technically still in her name after her husband died in a hit and run. She didn't want gratitude, but she had quietly expected decency. Instead, she was given lawn chairs and fluorescent buzz and the echo of her son-in-law's disdain. Elaine picked up the fork again, ate mechanically. The stuffing was too salty, the green beans limp. She chewed slowly, not tasting, just processing. Inside, someone turned up the music. Uptown funk thumped against the drywall like a smug reminder. Elaine swallowed, then she smiled, small, barely there but real, not from joy, from clarity. She looked at the garage wall behind her. There, still taped from when she first moved in, was the cardboard box she hadn't touched in months, labeled Important Papers, Mom. She knew what was inside, and suddenly she knew what came next. The fork tapped against her empty plate like punctuation. The garage light flickered once and held. The living room smelled like lemon floor cleaner and store-bought lavender. Elaine could hear Stephanie's voice floating in from the foyer, measured, bright, carefully casual. She begged to move in, Stephanie said, after her condo sold. We just couldn't say no. I mean family, right? Elaine paused halfway down the hall, hidden behind a half-open linen closet door. Her pulse ticked like a metronome in her ears. She's been through a lot, Stephanie continued. Widowhood makes people clingy. Soft laughter followed, clipped and polite. Elaine didn't recognize the voices, probably new neighbors. Stephanie changed friends like handbags. Elaine moved silently back toward the stairs. Later that evening, a guest in a silk blouse asked Elaine what she thought of the neighborhood. "I haven't been out much," she replied. "Mostly the library. I'm still adjusting." Stephanie leaned in with a smile that snapped like elastic. "She's modest. Trust me, she likes the attention. When she moved in, she said she missed being needed." Elaine looked at her daughter and blinked slowly. "I don't remember saying that." "You did," Stephanie said lightly, eyes already back on her wine glass. "Or something like it." The smile Stephanie wore was the kind Elaine used to tape on for parent-teacher nights. Tight, unbothered, presentable. Only Stephanie's version had edge. It cut clean, left bruises under the skin where no one could see. Later that night in the garage, Elaine sat with her journal open but blank. Her tea had gone cold. From inside, she heard Rob rummaging in the fridge. "She left the milk out again," he said. Stephanie groaned. "Just label stuff. I swear, next thing I know, she'll be leaving Post-its on the butter like it's her kitchen." "We should put a lock on it," Rob said. "Keep the snacks safe." Elaine closed the journal. She didn't speak to them about it, not then, not the next morning, or the next dinner, or the Friday after that when Stephanie returned from a charity mixer wearing a neon pink pin that read, "Hearts for the Homeless." She dropped her purse on the counter and grinned. "We raised 40 grand. You should have come, Mom. Would have been right up your alley." Elaine had been at the food bank all afternoon, volunteering with her old co-worker from Jefferson High. She'd returned with sore knees and a smile she hadn't felt in weeks. It vanished now. Stephanie laughed, not seeing the shift. "But maybe next time, leave the cardigan? Yeah, we're leaning more chic this year." Elaine said nothing. But that night, when the house quieted and the garage returned to its signature hum and flicker, she opened her suitcase. Buried beneath a zippered sweater pouch and a manila envelope labeled Med Records, she found it. A faded deed copy, yellowed slightly at the corners, creased once down the middle. Her name was listed in black ink, clean as gospel. Harold Whitaker and Elaine Whitaker, joint ownership with full rights of survivorship. The date, June 1989. She ran her fingers over the ink like Braille. Harold's signature was bold, slightly slanted, her own neat teacher's penmanship. Stephanie's name appeared nowhere. It never had. Elaine placed the deed back in the envelope and sealed it with a strip of packing tape. Not because she was leaving, but because now she knew she could. The next day, Stephanie tossed a tabloid on the counter. "Look at this," she said, pointing at a photo of a celebrity in sweatpants. "Can you imagine looking like that in public?" Elaine glanced down. The woman couldn't have been older than 40. "I imagine she's tired," Elaine said, "or just doesn't care what people like you think." Stephanie laughed. "That's the most boomer thing you've ever said." Elaine walked back to the garage without a word. As she sat in her lawn chair, she pulled a pen from her cardigan pocket and wrote one line across the top of her journal page. "I raised a mirror. I just never imagined what would look back." Behind her, the light flickered, and this time she welcomed the dark. Elaine had barely finished rinsing her teacup when Stephanie appeared in the doorway, arms crossed and tone tight with performative cheer. "Hey, Mom, since you've got time, could you sweep out the garage today? You know, just to make it less claustrophobic for guests." Elaine didn't flinch. "Of course," she said quietly, drying her hands on a dish towel that didn't belong to her. The broom was already propped by the door like a silent directive. Outside, the sun was sharp but shallow, November light, cold even when it looked warm. Elaine opened the garage door for air, pulled her cardigan tighter, and began sweeping from back to front, slow and methodical. Dust, leaves, old dog hair from a pet they never kept. She worked around the boxes carefully, tapping the broom under corners. When she reached the old shelving unit near the water heater, something caught her eye. A plastic storage bin marked in thick black Sharpie, "Mom's old junk." Elaine crouched slowly. The lid groaned as she peeled it open. Inside, books, photos, a chipped mug from her teaching days, and on top, a neatly folded letter, cream-colored with faded edges. Her breath stilled. She recognized the handwriting. "Dear Mom, thank you for everything. For the late-night study sessions, for working 2 jobs after Dad passed, for never making me feel like a burden. I know I never say it enough, but I see you. I love you. Stephanie, 2002. Elaine read it twice, then a third time. The ink hadn't blurred, but the sentiment had. She placed it gently beside her and dug further. Beneath a stack of old calendars and report cards was a manila envelope, heavy with something crisp inside. She pulled it free, flipped it over, and read the label, written in Rob's unmistakable block letters, Whitaker Future Sale Invo. Her heart didn't race, it sharpened. She opened the envelope. Inside was a single printed email chain. Rob had CC'd a local realtor, timestamped from 2 weeks ago. Subject line, looking ahead, 3-week turnaround feasible. We want the place listed soon once the situation is resolved, he'd written. It's all tied up for now, but there's no ownership concern. Should be a clean sale once the guest is no longer a factor. Elaine read it twice, her lips pulling into a slow, tight line. She pulled her phone from her cardigan pocket, portrait mode, no flash, and took a photo, then another, closer, capturing the subject line and timestamp. She flipped to the back page and snapped that too. Her fingers moved with the precision of someone cataloging evidence. Then she folded the email neatly, slid it back in the envelope, and placed it beneath the college letter, like one lie cushioning another. She looked back into the bin. At the bottom, wedged beside an old cell charger and a cracked CD case, was something harder, thicker than paper. She reached in. It was a worn leather card holder. She opened it. Inside, tucked into the crease, was a weathered business card. Carl Hendris, attorney at law, estate and property division, office number, direct line. Elaine smiled, small, sharp, and silent. Stephanie's voice called from the kitchen. You almost done out there? We've got guests coming for dessert. Elaine didn't answer. Instead, she closed the bin, slid it back onto the shelf, and gently swept the last pile of dust out the garage door and into the fading daylight. She placed the broom back where she found it, wiped her hands on her slacks, and walked calmly to her suitcase. Later, in the mirror above the garage sink, she looked at her own reflection. I see you too, she whispered. Then she pulled out the card and placed it on top of the deed. A future had just been scheduled, and this time, she was the one writing it. Elaine arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early and took the corner booth farthest from the windows. She didn't remove her coat, just stirred her tea and waited. Her fingers traced the rim of the ceramic cup, steady, rehearsed. At exactly 11 a.m., the door opened and Jordan Miles walked in. Late 20s, lean, sharp-eyed, with an energy that suggested ambition polished by humility. He wore a forest green button-up and dark jeans. No tie, no sales pitch, just a canvas folder tucked under one arm and the faint scent of eucalyptus clinging to his coat. You're Elaine Whitaker? He asked, offering a quiet smile. Just Elaine, she said, standing to shake his hand. They sat. She wasted no time. I need an evaluation, she said fast. No listing boards, no neighborhood gossip. Jordan opened the folder. I reviewed the documents you sent. The deed is clean. You're the sole legal owner. No co-trustees, no liens. And based on comps in your area, he slid a page across the table, you're sitting on about $790,000, conservatively. Elaine nodded, lips tightening around the number like it might shift. I want it gone, she said. Before they host another brunch? Jordan blinked once, then straightened. You said they? You mean your daughter and her husband? Elaine met his eyes. Yes, they believe the house is theirs. It's not. Jordan didn't pry, didn't ask about family drama or inheritances or what had pushed her to this edge. He just flipped to the next page in his folder and pointed. There's a client I work with. Buys properties like yours, quietly, privately, no signs, no walkthroughs, all cash offers, typically closes in under 21 days. You wouldn't get top dollar, but it's discreet. No noise. Elaine smiled faintly. That's exactly what I want. No noise. Jordan paused. There would be a walkthrough, just once, required for inspection, but we can stage it as a maintenance assessment. Elaine's eyes lit with something unreadable. Perfect. They're going to be out on Sunday shopping for a new espresso machine. Jordan grinned. Then Sunday it is. They left separately. That Sunday, Elaine stood at the door in her oldest cardigan, holding a clipboard and pretending to review roofing quotes. Jordan arrived on time with a contractor badge clipped to his jacket and a second man in tow, quiet, polite, with soft-soled shoes and a nod for every room. Elaine led them through the house like a docent. Every corner she once cleaned, every window she once washed, now pieces on a chessboard. This is the formal dining, she said evenly, though these days we eat around a kitchen island. The buyer took notes. Jordan asked questions only an agent would know to ask about HVAC age, flooring warranties, garage storage. Upstairs, Elaine paused outside the master bedroom. They remodeled last year, spent a lot on aesthetics. The buyer nodded. That'll help. They reached the last room, Stephanie's old bedroom, now a guest retreat, according to the framed sign on the door. Elaine opened it with care. Funny, she said. She used to paint the walls herself, with glitter glue. Said one day she'd have a mansion. Jordan glanced at her. And now? Elaine folded her hands. Now she has opinions. The tour ended in the foyer. The buyer shook Jordan's hand, then turned to Elaine. I'll have a formal offer to you by Tuesday. It'll be clean. I expect nothing less, she replied. They left. Elaine closed the door, locked it, then leaned her forehead against the wood just long enough to feel its cool steadiness. That evening, Stephanie returned with a shopping bag and a new scarf wrapped high around her throat. Did you see that espresso maker? So sleek. We should redo the backsplash to match. Elaine just nodded and returned to her crossword. In her pocket, Jordan's business card was warm from being handled. A game had started and only one player knew the rules. The printer in the corner of the garage wheezed like a tired lung, pushing out the final sheet of paper. Elaine pulled it gently from the tray, 2 pages stapled, crisp and understated. At the top, preliminary agreement, private sale pending inspection. Below that, her name, Jordan's client number, and the proposed offer amount. She slid the packet into a manila folder labeled Roofing Estimates in faded ink. Then she took a breath, walked inside, and left it on the kitchen counter, angled just so, not hidden, not flaunted, just there. Then she put on her coat and walked to the florist. At noon, Stephanie wandered in from yoga, ponytail fraying at the edges, phone in one hand, green juice in the other. She spotted the folder and glanced at it absently, then again, more slowly. She pulled the pages free, read the first line, and froze. "Rob!" she called, her voice climbing an octave. "Get in here now!" He clumped in, wearing mismatched socks and a ball cap. "What?" She handed him the pages with both hands like they were radioactive. He skimmed, scoffed. "This isn't real. She wouldn't dare." Stephanie swallowed. "It has her signature." He turned to the last page, stared. "Elaine Whitaker!" inked in blue. "Oh my God," Stephanie's voice cracked. "Is she selling the house?" "It's just a draft," Rob said, though his voice had dropped into something tight. "No one would buy without." "She is the owner," Stephanie interrupted. "You said we had time." "I said if she remembered how things worked, we had time," Rob snapped. Silence followed, thick and stinging. Just then, the front door opened. Elaine stepped inside, a brown paper bouquet cradled in her arms, sunflowers and eucalyptus. She set them on the hallway table and began removing her gloves, moving with the kind of calm that prickled. Stephanie stormed toward her, paper in hand. "You left this on purpose!" Elaine looked at the pages like she'd forgotten them entirely. "Oh, my paperwork. I wondered where I'd put that." "You're selling the house?" Elaine began unbuttoning her coat. "Yes, to a stranger, to someone who can tell the difference between a guest and a trespasser." Stephanie's mouth opened, then closed. Rob stepped forward. "You're being vindictive." Elaine shook her head almost sadly. "No, I'm being clear." "You're throwing away your family," Stephanie hissed. Elaine's eyes locked with hers. "You told me I didn't belong, so I'm making sure I don't." Stephanie's face went pale. "We took you in." "You mean the garage?" Elaine asked softly. "Or the kitchen where I'm not allowed to cook? Or the couch where strangers matter more than I do?" Rob stepped in again, louder. "You can't just pull the rug out like this." "We've been making plans." Elaine turned to him. "Yes, I saw the email. The guest is no longer a factor, remember?" He flinched. Stephanie took a step back. "This is cruel." "No," Elaine said. "This is correction." A silence fell, taut as fishing line. Rob's jaw worked like he wanted to say more. Then he turned, slammed the door to the guest bedroom so hard the wreath on the front door shivered. Stephanie stood in the middle of the living room, hands limp at her sides, eyes still on the paper. Elaine didn't say another word. She picked up the flowers, walked calmly to the sink, and trimmed the stems with kitchen scissors. Stephanie watched her mother move like a stranger she didn't know how to stop. Finally, Elaine turned, vase in hand. "You might want to pick a new brunch date." Stephanie blinked. "What?" Elaine set the vase on the counter gently, like it had always belonged there. I believe yours is canceled. She walked to the garage, closed the door behind her. Inside, the printer still held a single sheet, a backup just in case. Elaine smiled. Some storms don't make noise until they land. The sound of cardboard scraping concrete was the only thing keeping time in the garage. Elaine lifted each box with careful precision. No rush, no panic, just a methodical quiet that said, "This is not retreat, this is reclamation." She labeled each one with a fine tip marker. Books, winter clothes, photographs, teaching materials. She didn't sort for value, only for what mattered. Stephanie watched from the doorway that afternoon, arms crossed, jaw tight. "You're really doing this?" she said, her voice low, brittle. Elaine didn't look up from the inventory sheet. "Yes. Can we talk? Like adults?" Elaine wrote another line. Hallway lamp, cracked base, leave behind. Stephanie stepped inside. "You don't have to rush this. We can make a plan. Talk about transition." Elaine finally looked up. "You needed the couch," she said. "I need my spine." Stephanie blinked, stunned into silence. "I'm not evicting you," she tried again, reaching for something softer. "I just didn't expect to be held accountable?" Elaine asked, voice quiet but steel-threaded. Stephanie opened her mouth, then closed it. The next morning, Elaine took a cab to a cemetery tucked between two oak-lined streets on the quieter edge of town. The headstone was simple gray granite, just as he'd wanted. Harold Whitaker, loving husband, father, veteran, 1949 to 2004. Elaine crouched to clear the leaves gathered near the base. She pulled the deed copy from her coat pocket, folded neatly into thirds. She ran her hand over it one last time. "They tried to make me forget," she whispered. "But I remembered." Her fingers trembled, not from cold, but from the weight of the memory. Flashback, 1990. The living room walls were bare, the carpet smelled like new glue, and Harold held a set of brass keys like a winning lottery ticket. "It's small," he said, looking around, "but it's ours." Elaine had wrapped her arms around him from behind. "It's everything." They hadn't known then that he'd only get 14 years in it, that the sound of his boots in the hall would one day vanish, mid-sentence, mid-life. They had signed the deed together that June. She remembered the way he joked, "Now you can't ever kick me out, Whitaker." She'd laughed. "I won't have to." Back in the present, she smoothed the copy of the deed across the granite base and placed a small river stone atop it to keep it from blowing away. "I'm doing what you would have done," she said softly. "You always told me not to let anyone erase the work." A wind kicked up, tugging at the edge of her scarf. Elaine stayed a moment longer, just breathing, just existing where no one asked her to shrink. That night, she sat cross-legged in the garage, surrounded by half-packed boxes and a legal pad. The list had grown longer: wall mirror, unused rice cooker, broken umbrella stand. On another page, she made a second list. Items for new space: kettle, reading chair, sunlight. Stephanie opened the door once more, hesitated. "Do you want help packing?" Elaine didn't look up. "No." Stephanie nodded stiffly and stepped away. Elaine added one more item: peace. She capped the pen. And in the silence, the garage light flickered again, once. Then it held. The smell of sage-roasted potatoes and honeyed figs filled the house, masking the rot underneath. Elaine stood in the hallway, just beyond the dining room arch, half-shadowed, watching Stephanie swirl through the crowd in a blush silk blouse and two white teeth. Brunch was in full bloom. Glasses clinked. Someone complimented the backsplash. Stephanie laughed too loudly, clutching a mimosa like a microphone. Elaine hadn't been invited, she wasn't on the group text, but she knew this house better than anyone. It told her everything without saying a word. She leaned against the hallway wall, arms folded across the cardigan she refused to swap for something trendier. Her gaze swept across the polished buffet table: pear tartlets, mini quiches, name cards in rose gold font. Performative hospitality at its finest. From the far end of the dining table, a woman Elaine didn't recognize pointed to the ceiling trim. "The detailing in here is just gorgeous. You all did such a beautiful job." Stephanie beamed. "Thanks. Took forever, but totally worth it. We really feel settled now, you know." Elaine stepped forward slowly, the hardwood quiet beneath her socks. She looked directly at the woman. "It's not ours for much longer." Silence snapped the air taut. The guest blinked. I'm sorry. Stephanie's smile froze in place, still on her lips, but no longer in her eyes. Mom's being poetic. Elaine didn't blink. No, I'm being accurate. Rob appeared then, summoned by the sudden hush. What's going on? Elaine turned her gaze toward him, calm, steady. I was just letting your guests know they should enjoy the trim while it's still part of your world. Rob's voice pitched up. What the hell does that mean? Stephanie grabbed his arm. Not here, she hissed, smile still pinned like a dying orchid to her face. No, Rob said, shaking her off. If she wants to make a scene, let's have it. The guests began shifting awkwardly, caught between curiosity and their untouched parfaits. Elaine stepped into the center of the room, her eyes tracing each familiar detail, not with fondness, but with finality. Sales underway, she said. Paperwork's been submitted. Buyer already walked the property. A ripple of disbelief moved across the room. You're lying, Rob said. Elaine looked at him with something colder than contempt. You didn't think I was smart enough, right? Just a grieving woman you could park in a garage and outlive? Rob's face flushed deep red. You're just old, not clever. Stephanie gasped, but it was too late. The room exhaled in collective discomfort. Elaine smiled faintly. And yet I remembered who owns the house. Rob stepped forward, pointing a finger. You tricked us. This is vindictive and petty. No, Elaine said, this is legal and overdue. Someone coughed. A glass clinked. The guests had stopped pretending to be neutral. Stephanie whispered, You'll regret this. Elaine turned to her, the kindness long gone from her expression. Regret is spending Thanksgiving in a lawn chair while strangers warm your couch. Regret is mistaking cruelty for sophistication. Stephanie's lower lip trembled. Elaine glanced at the parfaits, untouched, melting slowly in their cups. She turned and walked out of the dining room without another word. Back in the garage, she opened a file box and pulled out the finalized listing draft. It had the buyer's initials and Jordan's signature. She ran her fingers down the first page and whispered, old enough to be ignored, clever enough to change the locks. Then, without pausing, she picked up the house key from the workbench and snapped it clean in half. The notary's pen scratched softly against the paper. Each loop and line another stitch in a final seam. Jordan passed the signed packet back across the mahogany conference table. The buyer, a polite man in his 50s with clean shoes and no appetite for small talk, gave Elaine a respectful nod. No handshakes, just a transaction carried out like the folding of a flag. Quiet, solemn, complete. Funds will transfer within 72 hours, Jordan said, his voice low but unmistakably pleased. But we're officially closed. You did it, Elaine. Elaine nodded, slipping the final signed page into her leather folio. She stood slowly, with the elegance of a woman not defeated, just deliberate. She walked out of the office with a certified check in her purse and 3 decades of sacrifice behind her. By that evening, Stephanie had filed an emergency injunction, unprepared, emotional, and utterly powerless. Elaine's attorney, Carl Hendress, sharp as ever in a charcoal suit and dry tone, sent back a 3-line response. Petitioner has no claim. Property title confirmed. Sale executed with full legal standing. Stephanie never showed up to the hearing. Within a week, Elaine was signing a new lease on a quiet corner unit in a seaside complex called Driftwood Commons. 1 bedroom, ocean breeze, no drama. The carpet was beige, the countertops dated, but the balcony faced the horizon, and no one told her where she could or couldn't sit. 2 days after move-in, her phone lit up. Rob, incoming call. She let it ring twice before answering. Not out of curiosity, out of control. I hope you know what you've done, Rob hissed. We've already started telling people. You'll look like the unstable one when this goes public. Elaine didn't sigh. She didn't argue. Instead, she opened her email, tapped a file titled Group Chat Rob May 2022 PDF, and hit forward. Rob's voice was still barking when she said calmly, Check your inbox. Click. Silence. Then a long exhale. You save that? I save a lot, she said, especially things that prove you're exactly who I thought you were. He hung up without another word. That same night, Elaine sat at her small new desk and opened her will. Her attorney had sent over the updated draft, already pre-reviewed. She flipped to the medical directive section and drew a clean black line through Stephanie's name. She replaced it with Carla Jennings, a former student who now worked in geriatric case management. Carla had visited Elaine 3 times over the last 2 years, always with flowers, always with questions about how to live fully while caring for others. Elaine had seen more compassion in those 30-minute chats than in the last 3 years of cohabitation. She added Carla's number in pen, initialed the margin, and exhaled. Then she pulled out a smaller envelope, handwritten, unsealed, and walked it across town. Stephanie wasn't home. That was fine. Elaine stepped inside the front door she still technically had access to until the locks were changed and climbed the stairs slowly, carefully. The house was quiet in a way that felt emptied out, like a stage after the curtain falls. On Stephanie's dresser, beside a vase of dead hydrangeas, Elaine left the envelope. Inside, a Xerox copy of the finalized sale, a photo of the check, and a short letter. You taught me how to vanish when it was convenient. I've taught you how it feels when the vanishing isn't yours to control. E. Back at her condo, Elaine poured herself a glass of wine and stood barefoot on the balcony. The ocean was loud tonight, restless, like something stirred but unfinished. Her phone buzzed again. Stephanie, this time texting just one word. Why? Elaine didn't reply. She turned the screen over, face down on the table. Then she reached into the folio, pulled out one last form. A sealed envelope, no label, no stamp. But tomorrow it would be mailed. And once it landed, there'd be no turning back. The Uber dropped them at the curb just past noon on Sunday. Rob grunted under the weight of 2 duffel bags, one slung over each shoulder, while Stephanie scrolled through her phone with a speed that looked frantic if you watched long enough. Her new manicure was chipped, her scarf was too warm for the weather. Remind me to call the contractor, she muttered. We still haven't had the gutters. She stopped mid-sentence. Rob followed her gaze. The front door of their house, Elaine's house technically, was closed tight. But something was different. A slim white card was taped just beneath the wreath. For access, please contact Jordan Miles, realtor. A phone number followed, scrolled in looping pen. Stephanie's eyebrows pinched. What the hell? She dropped her bag and rushed to the door, turned the handle. Nothing. She tried again, rattled it, pounded her fist against the glass. Elaine, Mom, are you serious? Nothing? Rob stepped forward, pulled out his key, tried the lock. It didn't fit. Changed, he muttered. She changed the locks. Stephanie's eyes flicked to the windows, closed, curtains drawn. She can't do that. She did, Rob said. Inside, the house sat in curated silence. New staging furniture replaced the worn couch. The kitchen was cleaner than it had been in months. The brunch platters, the personal photos, the potted basil, all gone. Neutral now. Market ready. 10 miles away, Elaine stood barefoot in her condo, sipping coffee with a splash of almond milk. Her phone buzzed on the counter, screen flashing. Stephanie, 3 missed calls. Rob, voicemail. She didn't touch it. Instead, she walked to the window and leaned against the frame. Her small balcony faced a row of seagulls pacing along the guardrail. She could smell the salt in the breeze. She tapped her security app and pulled up the door camera. Stephanie's face was contorted in disbelief. Rob was pacing now, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing wildly. Elaine watched them calmly, 2 people shouting at a house they never truly owned. A flashback slid in, soft and unwelcome. 2 years ago, Elaine stood in the same doorway, house key extended in her hand. Stephanie had taken it with a tight smile and said, "Just temporary, Mom. We're still figuring things out." "This is until your next place, right?" Elaine had nodded, suitcase by her side. Of course. They never gave the key back. Now it was Elaine who held every copy. Back in the condo, she opened her group messaging app. Selected Aunt Lois, Cousin Peter, her sister Marie, and 3 nieces who still sent Christmas cards. She typed, "Hi all, just wanted to share a quick update. House is officially sold. I've moved into a cozy place near the coast. New chapter. Lots of light. Hope you're all well. Elaine." She hit send. Less than a minute later, her phone pinged with replies. "Wait, what? Stephanie said you were just visiting. Sold? Wasn't it theirs? Proud of you, lady." She smiled at that last one. Her phone lit again, this time Stephanie's name. Another message. "Why would you do this to us? They're asking questions. I need to explain." Elaine didn't answer. Instead, she opened the photos folder and scrolled to the image of the signed check. then the buyer's name, then the deed. She saved them to a folder titled When History is Contested. Out on the street, Stephanie was now crying into her phone, pacing in front of the door. Rob kicked a flower pot into the grass. Elaine took one last sip of coffee, closed the camera app, and turned off her phone. She walked to her writing desk, opened her journal, and started a new entry. What happens when you stop asking for a seat and start building your own room? She paused, then added one more line. Control, when it returns, is quiet, almost like forgiveness, if you're not paying attention. She closed the journal and placed it beside the sealed envelope from the night before. Tomorrow she would mail it. Tonight she would rest. And out on the front porch of a house no longer hers, her daughter screamed at a lock that would never click for her again. The courthouse hallway smelled like bleach and old paper. Elaine sat still on the wooden bench outside room 4B, legs crossed neatly at the ankle, her purse resting on her lap. Beside her, Carl Hendris flipped through the case file without urgency, humming a little under his breath, something classical, and pointed across the hall. Stephanie and Rob huddled beside their attorney, a younger man with hair too perfect and a voice that was already straining at the seams. Rob kept pacing, whispering, gesturing toward the courtroom like he was planning a heist. Stephanie didn't speak. She stared at the beige floor tiles, blinking too often. A clerk opened the courtroom doors. Whitaker versus Whitaker now being heard. Elaine stood first. Inside, the room was sterile, almost bored-looking. Wood paneling, an elevated bench, a single flag in the corner. The judge, a middle-aged woman with sharp glasses and a tighter schedule, gave the case file a cursory glance before nodding. Let's proceed. Stephanie's attorney launched in. Your Honor, we are here to contest the unlawful sale of a residential property in which my clients resided for over 2 years. They were not notified, were effectively locked out, and have since experienced financial and emotional distress. Carl didn't flinch. He simply stood, adjusted his glasses, and slid a single document forward on the table. Your Honor, this is the property title. Sole ownership belongs to my client, Elaine Whitaker. This includes full rights to transfer, lease, or sell the property at her discretion. The plaintiff is not and has never been on title. The judge raised an eyebrow. And this was filed how recently? 35 years ago. Updated 10 months after the passing of her spouse. This version was certified again at time of sale. The other attorney stammered, but there were understandings, verbal agreements, contributions made by the defendants to the upkeep of the house. Elaine spoke for the first time. By contributions, do you mean the brunch trays and empty wine bottles? The courtroom chuckled quietly. Even the judge's mouth twitched. Carl continued, there is no lease, no co-tenancy, no financial investment traceable to the plaintiffs. Their presence was permitted as a courtesy, nothing more. The judge nodded once. So noted. Plaintiff's argument rests on assumptions rather than legal standing. This court sees no grounds for injunction or restitution. Stephanie whispered something to Rob, eyes wide and wet. The judge continued, brisk now. I am dismissing the case with prejudice, Miss Whitaker. You were within your rights. Elaine didn't smile. She simply gathered her things and stood, spine straight. Rob slammed his folder shut. This isn't over, he hissed, loud enough for it to echo. You manipulated everything. Elaine turned. Her tone was level, not loud. You're right about one thing. It's not over. She reached into her purse and pulled out a white envelope, walked it directly to him. For you. Rob took it reflexively, opened it, pulled out the first sheet, and froze. It was a trust document. Elaine's signature at the bottom, notarized, dated 4 years ago. Carl stepped up beside her. You might want to look at the second page. Rob did. There it was. Temporary transfer of title, non-binding, revocable. Recipient, Rob Jenkins. Duration, 24 months or until resident status becomes non-temporary. Signed by Elaine Whitaker, witnessed by 2 parties. Stephanie peered over his shoulder and read the same line. Her hand rose to her mouth. You were never— No, Elaine said. You were never anything more than guests. You were just the kind who overstay. Rob's face flushed crimson. Elaine looked past him toward the courtroom door. We're done here. She didn't wait for a reply. In the hallway, sunlight filtered through the high windows, catching dust in golden slants. Elaine walked slowly, her heels clicking with quiet confidence. Behind her, Stephanie's voice cracked in the distance. What do we tell people? Elaine didn't turn around. At the elevators, she pressed the down button, folded her hands, and whispered to herself, "Tell them the truth. If you remember how." The elevator dinged, and as the doors slid open, she stepped in, leaving them behind in a building built for judgments they never thought they'd face. The new couch was gray, soft but structured, the kind of color that looked different in every kind of light. Elaine hadn't chosen it because it matched anything. She chose it because it didn't need to. It held its shape. It didn't apologize for taking up space. She eased onto it now, mug in hand, the ocean humming just outside the balcony screen. The condo was quiet but not empty, a warm kind of silence, earned, not enforced. The bookshelf, finally assembled, sat under the window. Only the essentials made the cut, a few novels, some teaching journals, a small jade plant named Ruth that leaned toward the morning sun like it knew where comfort lived. The air smelled faintly of lemon oil and fresh linen, her space, her rules. Elaine ran her fingers over the armrest and exhaled slowly. A flash of memory flickered. 15 years earlier, Harold standing in their old kitchen, elbow deep in dish soap, laughing as she insisted they didn't need dessert plates for just the two of them. "One day," he said, "you'll do more than survive. You'll live." She hadn't understood it then. Not really. Life back then was a to-do list, parent-teacher conferences, rising grocery costs, sleepless nights over tuition and rent. Living had felt optional, something for other people. Now the quiet felt earned, sacred. She opened her journal and dated the page, something she hadn't done in years. November 19th. Things that matter. Morning light. Coffee that doesn't get cold because someone interrupted. Space to think. Silence without punishment. A knock at the door interrupted her rhythm. Elaine patted over in her socks and opened it slowly. Outside stood a young woman, early 30s, tan cardigan, holding a Pyrex dish covered in foil. Her smile was easy, unpracticed. She nodded toward the dish. "Hi, I'm Molly, Unit 2B. A few of us are doing an early Thanksgiving potluck next week. Wanted to invite you?" Elaine glanced down at the dish. "What is it?" "Pumpkin lasagna," Molly said, then laughed. "It's better than it sounds." Elaine smiled. It was real, but small. "That's kind of you," she said. "But I think this year I'll be doing something different." Molly nodded without offense. "Another time, then?" "Maybe." She took the dish anyway. It was warm in her hands, weighty and sincere. After Molly left, Elaine placed it on the counter and stared at it for a long moment. Then she turned her phone face up for the first time in hours. One message. "Stephanie, 6:42 p.m. I know I don't deserve an answer, but I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. You didn't deserve how we treated you. I see that now." Elaine read it twice, then tapped mark as unread. Not out of cruelty, out of caution. Some doors shouldn't be reopened just because someone finally found their manners. She stood by the window, watching the sky shift from lilac to ash. The horizon blurred gently, sea against sky, like two things learning to coexist without explanation. She wasn't ready for someone else's table yet. But the couch beneath her, that was hers. And soon, so would be the rest. On the journal page, she wrote one more line beneath the list. "Ownership isn't about title, it's about peace." She capped the pen. The heater clicked softly beside her. The ocean moved, steady as breath, and in the silence a new season waited, unrushed, unapologetic, and entirely hers. The knock came just after sunset, softer than the first one days ago. Elaine had just lit the cinnamon candle on the kitchen counter. She turned the flame down on the kettle, walked to the door, and checked the peephole, expecting maybe Molly again or one of the complex staff. But it wasn't either. It was Lucy, 16, pale from cold, hair windblown, a backpack slung low over one shoulder. Elaine opened the door slowly. "Lucy, hi." "Grandma." Her voice was tight, but her chin didn't waver. "Can I come in?" Elaine stepped aside without a word. Lucy entered, toeing off her sneakers and tucking them neatly to the side without being asked. She dropped the backpack by the door and stood in the middle of the living room like someone used to shrinking in corners. Elaine closed the door. "Everything okay?" Lucy exhaled. "No, not even a little." Elaine moved to the kitchen, poured 2 mugs of cocoa, hers with almond milk, Lucy's with hole, and gestured to the couch. Start from the top. Lucy sank into the cushion like it might disappear beneath her. Thanksgiving dinner, same as always. Mom was rehearsed, Rob was loud. Everyone just pretended nothing happened with the house. They made jokes about how you stole the equity. She blinked rapidly, then continued. Then after dinner, I heard Rob talking in the garage. I knew the voice, so I waited and I recorded it. Elaine turned to her slowly. Lucy pulled out her phone, tapped a file, and handed it over. The screen lit with a shaky video. Rob, beer in hand, standing with two other men. She's a walking guilt trip, he said, half laughing. Should have locked her in the basement instead of the garage. Might have gotten more resale value. Laughter. Then him again. Honestly, if she'd croaked sooner, we'd already have our second Airbnb by now. Elaine didn't breathe. The video ended. She handed the phone back with trembling hands. You recorded that? Lucy nodded. And emailed it to myself, just in case. Elaine pressed a palm over her mouth, then lowered it. I don't know what to say. Lucy looked down. You don't have to. I didn't come here for you to say something. I came because I want to be around someone who doesn't dilute me. Elaine blinked. Dilute you? Like they do me. I laugh too loud, I dress too weird, my hair's a statement, I see you. I know what they did, and I want better for myself, too. Elaine sat beside her, quiet, processing. The tea kettle whistled softly and then fell silent. She placed a hand gently over Lucy's. I need to ask. Did your mother know you were coming? Lucy gave a sad smile. She was mid-toast. I slipped out the side door. Don't worry, I texted her I was safe, didn't say with who, figured she'd guess. They sat like that for a while. Silence that was not empty, only sacred. Then Elaine stood and returned with a soft fleece throw from the chair and tucked it around her granddaughter's legs. I want you to stay, Elaine said, but only if it's what you want. No guilt, no obligation. You deserve to move toward peace, not away from pain. Lucy nodded, her throat tight. I want this. Elaine smiled, eyes glistening. Then stay. You'll never need a couch. You'll always have a home. With me. Lucy crumpled into her, sobbing once, and Elaine held her until the crying eased into calm. Later, they sat cross-legged on the living room floor, Coco half drunk, swapping stories. Harold's corny jokes. Lucy's science fair wins. Elaine's first protest as a teacher. It was late when Lucy fell asleep on the couch, the throw blanket tangled around her legs, her phone face down beside her. Elaine watched her sleep for a moment before turning out the light. Then she walked to her desk, opened her journal, and wrote, Sometimes the legacy isn't the house. It's who finds their voice in your shadow and uses it to step into the sun. She closed the journal. And this time, when she turned off the light, the dark didn't follow her. It waited, warm, still, and no longer alone. The condo was quiet again, but not in the way that used to sting. This quiet was steady, calm, broken only by the scratch of a fountain pen against archival paper. Elaine sat at her desk, wrapped in her softest shawl, the ocean pulsing faintly beyond the glass door. Her legal folder lay open before her, flanked by a steaming cup of tea and a box of old photographs. The final version of her will sat on top. She reviewed it one last time. Executive Carla Jennings, beneficiary Lucy Whitaker. Assets, condo, coastal living account, personal trust. Estimated value $368,000. Addendum. Letter to be opened at 18. Elaine slid the letter into a linen envelope. No seal yet, just a promise folded with precision. She wrote at the top, not just what you get, but how you live when you get it. Inside, the letter was written in her neatest cursive. Lucy, this place, this trust, this story, they're yours. But what matters more is the spine behind them. Remember, a home is not where you are allowed to sit, but where you are not afraid to stand. Let no one convince you peace must be earned with silence. Let no one call you selfish for keeping your center. You come from strength. Never forget that, not even when it comes wearing a familiar voice. Elaine signed it simply, Grandma. Later that day, while Lucy was at her youth activism workshop, Elaine set the will inside the fireproof box beneath her bed. She placed the linen envelope beside it. When Lucy returned, cheeks flushed from speaking in front of a group of strangers who didn't yet know how powerful she was, Elaine smiled. Hungry? Starving, Lucy said, kicking off her boots. Also, I think I might want to learn to make your garlic lentils. Molly asked if we could host next week's dinner. Elaine's hand came to her mouth, not out of modesty, out of recognition. Lucy leaned in. Want to write another one? Elaine nodded slowly. Yes, but not tonight. She closed the laptop gently, then turned to the window. Out beyond the glass, the ocean kept moving, unconcerned, unrushed, like healing that no longer needs permission. Elaine took a long sip from her mug and whispered, "They staged the garage with candles." Lucy snorted. "No way." Elaine smiled. "Fake ones." They both laughed, soft, full, and entirely earned. And inside the warm condo, beneath the soft lamplight, the garage wasn't cold anymore. It just had better walls. The condo smelled like thyme and roasted carrots. Jazz murmured through the small Bluetooth speaker on the bookshelf. Someone had oversalted the green beans and underbaked the pie crust, and no one cared. The table was too small for 7 people, but they squeezed in anyway, elbows bumping and plates crowding the edges like a joyful spill. Elaine sat at the head of the table, not because she'd asked to, not because it was ceremonially offered, because Lucy pulled the chair back for her and said simply, "Here." The chair wasn't ornate, just a sturdy wooden one with a blue cushion and a slight creak. But it felt like the kind of seat that had waited a long time to be filled properly. Elaine rested both hands on the table and looked around. To her right, Mrs. Yang, the 84-year-old from Unit 3C, wearing a wool shawl and telling stories about her first turkey in 1971. To her left, Donovan, one of Lucy's classmates, a quiet boy with big questions and no place to take them. Beside him, Molly from 2B, who brought cranberry soda, and her mother, who walked with a cane but had a contagious laugh that cracked the room wide open. And across the table, Lucy, eyes bright, hair pinned up messily, leading the chaos like someone born into warmth instead of fighting for it. The toast had not yet been made. The pie still sat untouched. But the feeling of fullness had already arrived. Before the food, before the thanks. It sat in the air like something sacred and earned. Elaine leaned back, letting the conversation swell around her. She didn't have to orchestrate it, didn't have to correct anyone. It moved without her, but in rhythm with her. Her phone buzzed once. She glanced at it. "Stephanie, 2:14 p.m. I'm sorry. Can we talk? Even just once. I miss you." Elaine didn't flinch. She read it slowly, then let her thumb hover. A moment later she typed, "I hope you grow, but I've grown past you. Send." Then she flipped the phone over and let it rest beside her glass. Lucy stood and raised hers. "Okay, it's my turn," she said, grinning. "I have a toast." Everyone quieted. Even the Jazz paused, as if the room itself leaned forward. "To my grandma," Lucy said, voice steady but brimming, "who didn't just make a house, who made a home from silence, who taught me that peace isn't what you beg for, it's what you build." Elaine's eyes welled. She pressed her palm to her chest just once. Donovan raised his glass to Elaine. The others echoed, clinked glasses, real and plastic, mismatched and fine. Elaine blinked slowly. It wasn't pride she felt, not exactly. It was something deeper, like standing still after a long walk uphill, like taking the last stone out of your shoe and finally realizing how light you can be. She looked out the window. The ocean stretched, soft and silver. No longer dramatic, just there, reliable. A horizon that didn't demand understanding, only recognition. Behind her, Lucy was already passing out pie, scraping too hard crust into something worth loving. Elaine smiled. She picked up her fork, took a bite of warm pumpkin, and let herself laugh when the whipped cream slid sideways. The chair beneath her creaked again, but this time it sounded like music. No one called her a guest. No one called her extra. She was simply there, at the head of her own table,